up here. So my name is Nancy Gilson. I'm the Director of Academic Degree Programs at GPS. And at least on the GPS side, oversee the 5-year programs, the BA MIA program with political science, the one with the 3 actually now with international studies, and also the BA MPP in the economics department. Natalie is your go-to person on the political science side, as she is the expert in political science curriculum. On our side, you know, we all sort of pitch in and do some advising and the prepping of material. Let me introduce my colleague at GPS, Amy Boutsadi. She's here. She's sort of the technical wizard who's really behind the green curtain instead of me. And so if you're come and join us in the program, Amy is someone that you will get to know. So I'm just going to go through the slides. Since there are not 100 zillion of you, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and interrupt me if you have questions, if something that I say isn't clear. If you have something that's off topic to what we're talking about, hang on to it. But as I go along, I'm happy to have you interrupt me with questions. I'm an interruptible lecturer and sometimes have a tendency to go off tangents. So I'm happy to have you pull me back in the direction of what you actually want to know. So what's the BA MIA program? So this is really, you know, the School of Global Policy and Strategy was created now over 30 years ago. In those days, it was known as the Graduate School of International Relations and Pacific Studies. And it's really a curriculum that combines economics, political science, and international management, sort of international business. And so political science is really one of the core threads that runs through all of the curriculum. And so having a 5-year program that pulls really good students who are interested in international relations, comparative politics, to include the United States, by the way, as I think about comparative politics. I know political science departments rarely talk about the United States in comparison, but you should ask yourself why that's the case, by the way. And so having this BA MIA program where you have a very strong disciplinary foundation in the Department of Political Science, and then come into the training for the Masters of International Affairs it's a no-brainer in terms of just the way that the program is put together. And I think most importantly, one of the things that you need to understand is that the curriculum that you would take doing the 5-year program, where you're taking the graduate core as seniors still as undergraduates, and then 1 year of undergraduate core, is exactly the same curriculum that the 2-year master's students take. It's exactly the same. So while you are coming into it as undergraduates, it's absolutely seamless, your movement into it. You become graduate students basically as undergraduates, and have all of the opportunities and resources that graduate students would have. And you do it, you get the master's degree in essentially just 1 more year, rather than having to apply and adding 2 years on top of getting an undergraduate degree. So if you apply to the BA MIA in April of your junior year or your 2nd or 3rd year, depending upon whether you came in as a freshman or a transfer student, you would change your political science major to political science international affairs after being admitted, graduate the following year after taking a year of core classes with your bachelor's degree in political science international affairs, and then do 1 year of graduate work and graduate again, as I said, with the very same degree that 2-year students get you know, as they come back to the university. And it's really a program that allows you to allows you a sort of broader set of possibilities for career and study than you're going to get in any single department. I'm a political scientist. My PhD is in political science, but I can tell you that, getting a degree in political science doesn't let you do everything. Don't tell the professors that, but, an MIA gives you strengths in international management. It gives you strengths in development economics, corporate social responsibility, as well as the sort of traditional careers in international affairs, and policy making. So it's really, in that sense, it's an incredibly flexible and diverse set of diverse opportunities. So, here's the sort of summary of that. I mean, it really does blend some of which you will come to us having done: politics, policy making, how politics, not only how politics get made, how do constitutions shape the policy-making institutions, but what are the politics of it? Why do you get guaranteed family income in European countries and not in the United States? And it's not just because Europe has a left and the United States doesn't. The United States does, but why is the left essentially out of power, whereas, left politics, left parties in Europe have a voice? It has to do with the way that institutions are designed. And so understanding not only literally how does a bill become a law, like you all learned in American civics classes, but what are the politics of regulation making, economics, international development. And, while GPS has a focus, its expertise is in Asia and the Americas broadly, we take very seriously the idea that the United States is part of that, as well as Mexico, Central America, Latin America, and Asia broadly understood, to include increasingly at GPS, South Asia, Southeast Asia, to include the Philippines, as well as the traditional countries of Japan, Korea, and China. We have students who go on to do all kinds of work in human health policy, corporate social responsibility, technological advances. We've got courses in the environment and energy that are co-taught between GPS political scientists and an engineering faculty, so that you're bringing in people who are working in the sciences or in STEM fields, who know what's going on with the technology. You can talk about energy all you want to, but if you don't know what's going on in the development of technology, it's sort of a little bit like raising imaginary policy rather than real policy, if you don't know how the technology works or how it's perceived, right? So it's a great mix of social sciences. We have faculty who do climate, who are also teaching classes at SIO. Increasingly access and working with faculty over in public health and in global health as well. So what makes you eligible? First of all, you have to be a political science major. At some point, you have to go see Natalie and declare your intentions. You have, at the time of your application, you have to have a cumulative GPA of a 3.0 or higher and a major GPA of 3.4. And if you look at your degree audit, you'll see that your major GPA is your upper division work in your major, is the way the audit calculates that. Amy, is there somebody waiting to get in? I'm showing that there is. And so, what we understand is that a lot of people come in and struggle in some of their GEs, or they come in as pharmacy majors and then decide they want to, be a political scientist. And so sometimes your cumulative GPA isn't exactly a fair representation of your ability to work. And so we look at your major GPA. where you've had the opportunity to do well and sort of really, expand yourself intellectually. You have to be able to demonstrate at the time when you apply. We want to see that you're able to complete all or nearly all of your upper division political science course requirements by the end of your junior year. That's because the core takes up an entire year. And while there is some room in there, depending on how hard you want to work, the core is 3 courses in the fall, 3 courses in the winter, and 2 in spring. So taking additional courses in political science, if you still have a lot of requirements left, makes it very difficult to do well. And the workload is, frankly, more in a graduate class than it is in most undergraduate classes. So we like to have you be finished or nearly finished by the time you start the core. You also have to be able to demonstrate that you'll be able to reach 6th quarter proficiency in a GPS language by the time you graduate with the MIA. So you don't have to be able to do that by the end of your senior year, but you do have to be able to do that by the end of your graduate year. And the requirement is 6th quarter proficiency. So you don't have to take 6 quarters of language if you've already taken, if you have some background and you only need to take a couple more quarters. It's really the proficiency of the 6th quarter that's the requirement, okay? So it's not necessarily, you're not necessarily looking at 2 years of language depending on where you are. And depending upon what your background is, we have a summer prep program in quantitative methods and in microeconomics. So if you don't have any of those in your background, we may require you to attend summer prep. That's not intended to be punitive. It's intended to make sure that when you get into the core in the fall that you're really prepared. And just to give you some idea about the size of our summer prep program, across our 3 programs, 2-year programs, the MIA, the MPP, and the new degree that we have in Chinese economic and political affairs, we admit on average around 170 students a year, something like that. About 150 of them end up doing prep. And so it's really, it's sort of the year begins there. The grades don't matter. It's all really introducing you to the material. So attending prep is really to everyone's advantage. In the 10 years that I've been director, I've never heard anyone say, I wish I hadn't done prep. It was such a waste of time. I've heard a lot of people say, I'm glad I went. I've heard people say, why didn't you require me to go? I would have gone and I would have done better. But no one ever comes back and goes, boy, was that a waste of time. And so if we require you to do prep, and a lot of the BA MIAs end up doing it, don't look at it as if we're punishing you for not having done something that you should have done. So this is the sort of overview of the program, and I'll talk a little bit about each of these as we go through. But just so you get a sense of what the program looks like, your lower division requirements, your upper division requirements through the political science department, and then the GPS specific requirements so that you see them laid out in a sort of neat fashion here. And I'll go through each one of these as we go on. But one of the things I want to say, this is an incredibly well put together curriculum. We worked hard, my colleague and I worked hard with the political science department to develop a set of requirements in political science that made the movement into the BA MIA program really quite seamless. You will be coming in some ways with a better background than some of the students that we admit into the 2-year program. They're smart, but you've got political science and we've got students who have backgrounds in music performance, playwriting, fashion design, theater, communications, all kinds of things. And so So you're really coming in a way that this transition is quite smooth. So the regional requirement. So it is, GPS is, if you will, the Asia Pacific focused. Facing the broader Asia Pacific. And the reason for that isn't just because we're in California, and so talking about Europe doesn't really make sense. The reason for that really is that the origins of GPS was the recognition on the part of some of the faculty then in the political science department at UCSD that in the end of the 20th century and certainly into the 21st century, the real orientation of the world was going to be toward Asia and the Americas. That what was going to be where the challenges for the United States were going to be were really in their economic and business relations with Asia and the Americas, and not in military conflict in Europe. And so the curriculum is really oriented with that idea in mind. So this shows you the GPS regional specializations: Latin America, which includes Central America and Mexico, and even Cuba, though it's not formally Latin America, I think it's part of Latin America. China, Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia, and Southeast Asia is a broad category that includes the Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and increasingly those areas where they have relations. And Southeast Asia is a hugely diverse region of the world, and to have it as a single focus is a little odd. It's increasingly odd, actually, but what it means is that now that we have faculty that are interested in Southeast Asia more broadly, it used to be that you had two choices for language: Bahasa Indonesian or Mandarin. Increasingly, we have students who are using Hindi, certainly Tagalog because of the Philippines, Spanish because of the colonial presence in the Philippines. We've gone back to accepting French for people who are interested in Southeast Asia, more formally Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, because of the return to an interest in French and French education in Southeast Asia. We have people who speak Tamil because of the presence of minorities in places like Singapore and Malaysia. And so it's, the idea of what a GPS language is has expanded. We even have students who are focused on China who are using Arabic because they are interested in minority populations or Chinese relationships with the countries that ring the outer border of China, many of which are Arabic-speaking countries. We have students who are studying Latin America who are using Japanese because of the importance of Japanese communities in places, for example, one of the biggest in Brazil, and their importance in sort of economic development policies, as well as in one case, Alberto Fujimori, being major figures in some of the countries. So while these are the traditional languages accepted for the region, if you can make a good intellectual argument for the use of another language, we're willing to consider it as well. And let me just say one thing too about that's not on this slide, which is that for those of you who are native speakers of another language, who have perhaps gone to school in another country in another language because you were a military kid, or you came to the United States as after going to high school someplace, or you were in the military, and so therefore you have a language certificate from one of the good language programs that the U.S. military uses. We routinely accept those as fulfillment of the 6-quarter proficiency as well. And then we give proficiency exams for people who have grown up in bilingual households, for example, in the United States. So there's more than one way to fulfill that obligation rather than trudging through 6 quarters of a language at UCSD. Trudging in the good way, don't mean a negative. So your lower division requirements in political science, these are the ones that we require, and you have to get it a C- or better in these. And the reason that it's these that we look for is because this is really a great foundation for moving into the GPS core. Data analytics and political inquiry. Political inquiry is the old course, sort of research methods. The data analytics sort of ratchets that up a little bit. And then, of course, comparative politics and international relations, so that you have both IR theory as well as some, at least passing experience in thinking about the politics between countries, which is what comparative politics is. International relations includes international organizations, if you've taken courses, for example, with David Lake, but also the sort of politics of international actors. Comparative politics is the relations among states. And so sort of their politics on the ground. So these are really the foundational courses, and we expect you to have all of them and with passing grades. And then this is the curriculum that applies to this program. Now, I'm sure Natalie will appreciate it if I'm very clear with you that this is the curriculum for those of you who want to do the BA-MIA program. It's different from the required curriculum of any of the other tracks in the political science department. So if you are currently in the IR track and you're thinking you want to do this, please make sure that you look at these requirements, because they are different. We have a lot of people going, wait, what, I have to take American politics classes? Why didn't you tell me that? I am telling you that now, so that you're not, so that you don't get confused later, and so that Natalie continues to like to work with us, and we make sure that you know what your requirements are. But we do require 2 American politics classes. Why? Because you're much more likely to study institutions per se, which is to say institutions as institutions, in American politics classes than you are in IR or comparative politics. Because the study of American government has typically been done through the lens of institutions, the interaction between institutions and popular actors, individual actors, interest groups, the politics of federal systems, and so on. And because we do a lot of that, but take it out of just the United States and look, for example, at federal systems in other countries, India, for example, or the way that institutions determine political activity. Why do you get certain, as I said a minute ago, certain kinds of policy outcomes in some countries and not in others? A lot of it has to do with constitutional and institutional design. And so you begin to get the feel of that in the American politics classes. So this is not, oh, we expect everybody to know something about the United States. This really does have to do with the kind of what's adjacent to taking those classes. And then international political economy, taking a class with someone like Simeon Nichter, where you learn about the interaction between politics and economics at a state level. Either 2 classes in either international relations or comparative politics, so you have some familiarity with countries and how a country other than the United States makes policy. And then 3 elective courses, and it's a fairly extensive list. It's not all inclusive of the political science department, so please also look at the lovely list that Natalie has put together and works hard to keep current for us. Thank you, Natalie. So that you're able to really take some classes in the political science department, because you're in one of the finest political science departments in the country, if not the world. And so we do want you to explore the department that you're in. And so we want you to take some other elective courses in the things that you're particularly interested in. You can take courses in 3 different areas. You can come in with a depth in, say, policy analysis, or a depth in the study of Latin America, or political economy or development. That's fine. That's up to you. But as long as you, the first 3 of these are fairly set, 2 from IPE, 2 from these American politics courses, and 2 either in IR or comparative politics, and then you have 3 electives to play with. Okay, so so it's not too tightly constrained, but again, not the same requirements that you have in political science, so please keep that in mind. Okay. And this is the core at GPS, and these are the core classes, the graduate courses that you'll take as seniors, as undergraduates, right? So this is why we want you to have all of your political science requirements done or near done by the time that you come in. This is a fairly standard set of courses. GPS is known for being at the cutting edge of methods courses. We think that the world operates on the basis of data. Whether you're interested in healthcare, or you're interested in social policy or human rights, being able to look at data, deciding if it's any good, being able to make a policy recommendation based on that data requires that you know how data is put together, how it's gathered, how it's assessed, how it's been manipulated. And so you have 2 quarters of quantitative methods. QM2 involves learning how to code data. Microeconomics in the fall, international economics in the spring, so that you're really bookending, if you will, the sort of 2 primary areas of economics that we look at. Globalization is a course that's taught by 1 political scientist and 1 economics faculty. And this really takes seriously the idea of the interaction between the migrations of labor and people and trade and international politics, and is globalization good, or is it largely bad, or is it neutral? How do economic trade, sort of economic phenomena or business phenomena affect political decision making? How does security play into economic policy making, for example? In the winter, you'll see, this is often surprising for a lot of people, a quarter of accounting and finance. You may be saying to yourself, I didn't get a degree in political science so that I could take accounting. But the reality is that if you're serious in looking at economics or the economic behaviors of states, you really do have to understand how businesses are run. And how they're managed, how do they get profits? It's very difficult, I think, to understand how not only capitalist but non-capitalist systems work and how they think about their role in the world without understanding how firms operate. And so we require you to take a quarter that gives you a little bit of accounting and a little bit of finance. And then policymaking processes, which is one about political acting and making. This is taught by a series of political science faculty. And, again, looks at, in a comparative way, looks at different systems. And then in the spring, international politics and security. That, again, looks at the way in which security threats, as well as security policy, interacts with decisions about the relationships among states. Why, for example, are we very close relationships with some states? Do we have very close relationships with one states and not others? Why don't we just have a kind of realpolitik yardstick by which we determine We should be very good friends with oil producing states and everybody else we don't care about because they don't really have anything. Why do we have strategic relationships that take the configuration that they do? And so the way that we teach international politics and security involves those kinds of economic and business considerations. So it's a little bit different from the way that you'd be doing it in the political science department. Okay. And then everybody has to have a career track. Now, for most of you, you'll be fulfilling your career track requirements in your graduate year. Maybe you'll have time to take 1 or 2 classes in your senior year, depending on how hard you want to work and how many classes you want to take at a time. But these are the career tracks. A career track is 2 required courses and 3 electives. And so these are typically ones that are, the required courses are usually a sort of politics of and economics of. So for example, in international economics, there's one of the required courses is a class on trade. And the other one is on fiscal and monetary policy. In other words, how do states make, like, who decides what a dollar is really worth abroad? You know, how do currencies maintain their value in the world? And so sort of policy making, you know, in a broader world. Janet Yellen gave her talk today. She's as you know, been nominated by the Biden administration. And if you want to have a sense of the politics of fiscal and monetary policy, go back and read her statement at her nominating hearing today. It's very interesting. This stuff doesn't just happen. People make decisions about it. It's all a policy decision. International environmental governance. This looks at how decisions about environmental and energy policy gets made, as well as what the current state of that policy is. And again, going into the Biden administration, this is going to be very different. As the United States moves back into the Paris Accord, the conversations in these classes are going to look very different than they would have looked 2 years ago. International management is really an international business track, but it is much more interdisciplinary than anything that you would get in a business school. And so in addition to things like international business and marketing, you also have things on, for example, on you know, do you have open markets or closed markets? Are trade agreements good for business or bad for business? How do they treat labor? And so again, we have a fairly expansive definition of what we mean by management that's quite specific to GPS. And then your regional specialization. So again, you know, these, and by the way, I know that Korea, China, and Japan are not regions, they're countries. You know that, right? But we require you to take one economics of, so for example, with China, the social and economic development of China taught by Barry Naughton, but then also Chinese politics. And so you have a sense of both the political, you know, sort of the political economy of a country or a region. And that's true across all of these, all 5 of these. And then you have the language requirement. And we hold on to the language requirement because we think that it's important. We're under no illusions that if you take only 6 quarters of Chinese, that you're probably not going to be able to work in Chinese if you were to, say, get a job in Beijing. But learning a language means that you gain entrance in some ways to understanding the way in which the people who live in these places think about their own country and their own social norms and their political norms. And so studying a language means that you have access to some material that you wouldn't otherwise have to read. Understanding the discourse in countries largely comes, you know, via language. It's a very important transmission belt, if you will, for knowledge about other countries. And so that's why it's hard. It's easy to read the newspaper. It's hard to read a novel. because the deeper you get into the language, the more it requires a kind of cultural and social sensitivity. But if that's true of reading, it's much better to read Neruda in the original than in translation. If that's true, then it tells you something about the import of learning a language and understanding a culture and a country. Okay. So this very busy chart, and it is busy. It looks better at full screen than it does when I looked at it earlier. But this is mostly to show you how first of all, it's to prove to you that it's possible to do this in 5 years, and to show you the organization of it. That you not only have time to do your lower division work and your general education requirements, but there's also room in here for electives along the way, that you're not going to be nose to the grindstone for 5 years if you came in as a freshman. And if you're a transfer student, hold on, the next slide is for you, so don't go anywhere. But you'll see, that it's eminently doable. While it does require organization, meet today with Natalie, while it does require a kind of organization, a thought about how you're going to schedule classes, it doesn't mean that you're only going to be doing only the requirements. And there are a couple of other things that I want to point out that are on here. This shows you, if you look at the third year, applying in April. And then moving into your fourth year, where you'll be taking the graduate core. And then you'll see in summer 2022, it says, why summer 2022? Oh yeah, no, that should actually say summer 2021. If you're applying this year, it'll be summer 2022. That's correct. I'm mixing myself up. You have to take an internship in between your senior year and your year of graduate work. This is a mandatory internship. All BA MIAs have to take them. And there are two reasons for that. One is because we think it's probably your first opportunity to really see whether the kind of work that you think you want to do is something that you want to do. And so our career services, which is very skilled, helps you find and apply to internships in United Nations High Commission for Refugees, or you want to go to Mexico and work on transfer policy, or you want to go to Hawaii for the summer and be at the Pacific Fleet Command, or you want to stay in California and work for an energy company. We help you find your internship. We also help fund them. It would be cruel to require one and dangle a bunch of cool internships in front of you and then tell you that if you can't afford an airplane flight or you can't afford to live in Geneva, that you can't do it. And so we do indeed help fund internships once you've found them. The other thing is that if you're coming into the graduate program as an undergraduate, the chances are is that you don't have very much professional experience on your resume. So this allows you to have something on your resume so that when you start in your graduate year to look for a job, the job that you now hope you're going to have at the end of this program, you can now tell an employer that you have done an internship in the area in which you're seeking work, that you have an experience, that you have a supervisor, that you know what the work is. Okay. And here is the same thing for transfer students that shows you the same thing, that it is possible to apply to the program. Now, if you come in as a poli-sci student, but you haven't done the lower division work, it may take you longer. Some transfer students don't apply until their second year on campus. This has you applying in your first year on campus. That's fine. We can live with that. As long as you don't mind, we don't mind. And if you come in without the lower division work, or you come in needing a lot of your GEs, then it's difficult to do it in exactly 3 years. But we don't hold that against you. Okay. So the application deadline this year is April 10th. When you look at the application online, you can get to it through the connect.grad UCSD. It'll ask you to apply. Now, one thing that's very important is that we'll ask if you apply this April, it's going to ask you to apply to fall of 2022. The reason for that is that you're actually applying to the graduate program. And if you apply this April, next year, you're still going to be an undergraduate. But that's correct to apply to fall of 2022 because that's when you actually become a graduate student. So you're filling out the application now. We use it to assess you now, but it will be formally a graduate application once you graduate with your bachelor's degree, and then we formalize your application to GPS by sending your application to graduate division where they approve it. So it can be a little confusing for people when they apply. We'll be doing an application workshop later on in the quarter. If you intend to apply this year, it's a good idea to come to that. One of the GPS admissions people will be there, okay? You're required to do a statement of purpose as it's explained here. It also allows you to do an optional essay. If there are things that you think matter to you that you want to address, that's a good opportunity to do that. A resume, a transcript of your time at UCSD, and if you went to another university or a community college, that transcript, and then 2 recommendations. It's a fairly standard application. So if you're interested in the program, let me suggest that you make an appointment with me so that we can talk about what we look for when we look at applications, what a statement of purpose might look like, and make sure that you understand what your requirements are. Here it gives you, again, the outline of what we'll be looking for in terms of what you'll have finished by the time you start the core in your senior year, right? And so these are the application requirements sort of in a very efficient fashion. So strong GPA, the ability to talk with some knowledge about your interest in international affairs, how you got interested in it, coursework that you've taken that's kind of fed that interest, what you want to be when you get out with a master's degree. If you have relevant internship or volunteer work, we know that given both that you're undergraduates and that we've all been under more or less house lockdown for the last year, that the chances that you've been off and done internships out in the world are fairly slim. So don't panic over this. We're perfectly aware of the circumstances under which we're all operating right now. So not having had a research assistantship or an internship working somewhere, this is not going to mean you don't get into the program, okay? Good recommendations. You want to ask people who are going to write you strong recommendations. And an organized statement of purpose. And I will have a statement of purpose workshop later in the quarter, and I'm happy to meet with anybody who wants to talk about what a good statement of purpose should look like. Financial resources. One of the advantages of doing the 5-year program is, first of all, that you get to go, the first year of the program you do as an undergraduate, and so pay undergraduate fees. It also means that undergraduate financial aid, if you're using financial aid, will apply. There is also graduate level financial aid once you matriculate into graduate standing. It's more or less the same forms, but they recalculate need. And if you do well in the core in your senior year, a number of you will find that you can get TA-ships working as a teaching assistant in your graduate year. Will pay your tuition and fees. We hire upwards of 30 students a year in various TA-ships And it's a great way to go to graduate school without racking up a lot of debt. Okay. And you can also, political science is always looking for TAs and readers. If you have management experience, you can TA at Rady, for example, other departments on campus. And so there are opportunities of paying your bills by being a TA. This is just a short list of places where we currently have people working after they get their MIA. I spent last week an hour talking to an old student who was here at GPS in the 90s, then IRPS, who's coming in on 30 years of working for the United Nations High Commission on Refugees. She's right now in her last tour for them in Rwanda. Before that, she was in Geneva. She's been in Eritrea, in East Timor. I think this is her second or third tour actually in Africa. I think she was in South Africa for a while. She's worked in various places in Asia. And so, people leave and they do very interesting things. Management consultants. We have a graduate who is in charge of policy analysis for YouTube's music business. We have people who go into the foreign service, who go into investment consultants in international banks, research assistants at think tanks like Brookings and the World Bank. So lots of opportunities for very interesting things. And we have a very good career services program staff that helps you think about what you're interested in and how to do what you're interested in the right places. So this is just, the career services in a little bit more detail. This summer, before you actually begin the core, you'll have to go through a career development program. They begin the process of teaching you how to use their services. And they do career coaching. They bring in alums. They introduce you to people who have graduated from GPS, who are helping our students find jobs. They do workshops. They drive you crazy in making sure that you have a perfect resume. Mock interviews. People complain about, oh, I have to do another draft of my resume, but that's the one that gets them a job. They do outreach events. Hopefully, starting next year, we'll be able to travel again. So Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Washington, D.C., and as I said, there's funding for your internships and other kinds of professional development. We've had students, for example, the last 2 years that the United States was still in the Paris Accord, go to Paris and go to the climate meetings. We helped pay for them to get there. And that was, in the fall quarter. So they got to miss classes and go to Paris. How bad is that? And so we work really hard to make sure that you're being positioned for the career that you want. So here's how you can reach me. This is my email address. Natalie, you should know how to reach through the VAC because since you're all here, I'm assuming that you've all been engaged with talking to Natalie in some way or another. And you read your emails because we sent out the announcement for today via email. Good signs, all of you. And so I want to encourage you to send me an email. I'm happy to talk to you about your interest in the program, and I'm happy to answer questions that you might have. Are there any